Hypothalamus Artificial Intelligence, HI, and Research Center for Advanced Decision Technologies, RCADT, presents the conference. Mathematical Artificial Neural Nets. Brief lecture edited by Jesus Velasquez Bermudez. Artificial neural nets. For many scientists and experts, artificial neural nets are the equivalent of artificial intelligence. For this reason, in this lecture when we refer to AI we are referring to artificial neural networks. In 1943, Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts created the concept of artificial neural networks. They published the article, A Logical Calculation of the Ideas Immanent in Nervous Activity. McCulloch and Pitts tried to explain how the brain could produce highly complex patterns, by using many basic cells that are connected. Neural networks were growing, and in practice they took the name of artificial intelligence. They were also called machine learning. For example, convolutional artificial neural networks correspond to ANNs specialized in identifying certain types of patterns, such as images. The image presents an example of an ANN oriented to recognize images of numbers written freehand. The result is a discrete indicator associated to the number read. The state-of-the-art of artificial intelligence is the Generative Pre-trained Transformer, GPT. It's a type of large language model, an LLM, and the framework for generative artificial intelligence. It is an artificial neural network used by machines in natural language processing, which is based on the Transformer deep learning architecture, pre-trained using large datasets of unlabeled text, and that can generate novel human-like content. A LLM is a machine learning model that can understand, generate, and translate human language. LLMs are trained on massive amounts of data, such as text from the internet. They can be used for a variety of natural language processing, NLP tasks. Most LLMs have these characteristics and are sometimes widely referred to as GPTs. In 2024, John Hopfield and Geoffrey Hinton were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their foundational contributions to machine learning, particularly through their work on artificial neural networks. Artificial General Intelligence, AGI, is a hypothetical type of highly autonomous artificial intelligence, AAI, that would match, or exceed, human capabilities in most, or all, economically valuable cognitive work. It contrasts with narrow AI, which is limited to specific tasks. Super Artificial Intelligence, ASI, on the other hand, refers to AGI that far exceeds human cognitive capabilities. The creation of AGI is a primary goal of AI research and companies like OpenAI, Google, and Meta. A 2020 survey identified 72 active AGI research and development projects in 37 countries. The timeline for achieving AGI remains a topic of ongoing debate. As of 2023, some argue that it may be possible in years or decades, others argue that it could take a century or more, a minority believes that it may never be achieved, and another minority claims that it is already here. The Nobel Geoffrey Hinton has expressed concern about the rapid progress towards AGI, suggesting that it could be achieved sooner than many expect. There is debate about the exact definition of AGI and whether modern LLMs, like GPT-4, are early forms of AGI. There is controversy over whether AGI poses an existential risk. Many AI experts have stated that mitigating the risk of human extinction posed by AGI should be a global priority. Others consider that the development of AGI is too remote to think about such a risk. Parameters is a synonym for weights, which is the term most used for the parameters of a neural network. Batch size, learning rate, etc. are hyperparameters, which basically means that they are specified by the user, while weights are what the learning algorithm will learn through training. According to multiple sources, ChatGPT-4 has approximately 1.8 trillion parameters. Given the approach of trying to achieve artificial general intelligence, AGI, by estimating a neural super network, part of the effort is concentrated on the supercomputers needed for this simultaneous estimation of parameters. This will always be a constraint on the growth of AI. The image presents the most detailed map of the brain of an animal ever mapped, a fruit fly. Several research teams have mapped this organ for the first time in an adult specimen, which contains about 140,000 neurons, and more than 50 million connections. Fruit flies share 60% of human DNA, and 3 out of 4 human genetic diseases have a parallel. Therefore, understanding their brains is one more step toward understanding the brains of larger, more complex species, such as humans. Its brain may look small, it has about 1 million fewer neurons than the human organ, but a fruit fly can see, smell, hear, walk and fly. In addition, they socialize, navigate and learn from the experience. Trying to determine how this tiny brain works involves estimating at least 50 million parameters that represent its connections, plus the current flows between them. It should be noted that the seminal concept of artificial neural networks, proposed by McCulloch and Pitts, in 1943, is still the general approach of AI. He does not find in the literature efforts aimed at giving AI the ability to understand complex mathematical processes, which accurately explain the real world, which is necessary for decision-making that benefits all humanity. The research work continues with AI based on the estimation of data-driven supermodels, without advancing to a hybridization of concepts and visions. The greatest advantage of mathematical artificial neurons is that they represent clearly defined objects within a system, that communicate with each other through fully known mathematical laws, and that they comply with laws with transitivity and divisibility laws, in such a way that a system can be atomized, to the level of knowledge that the scientist on duty has. This process leads to the atomization of the system, so that a problem of large dimensionality becomes a large number of problems of very low dimensionality. Within a nervous system, a neuron is an electrically excitable cell that fires electrical signals called action potentials through a neural network. The neuron is the main component of nervous tissue in all animals. Neurons communicate with other cells through synapses, specialized connections that commonly use minute amounts of chemical neurotransmitters, to pass the electrical signal from the presynaptic neuron to the target cell, across the synaptic gap. Neurons are highly specialized for the processing and transmission of cellular signals. Given their diversity of functions performed in different parts of the nervous system, there is a wide variety in their shape, size, and electrochemical properties. For instance, the soma of a neuron can vary from 4 to 100 micrometers in diameter. An artificial neuron is a mathematical function conceived as a model of biological neurons. Artificial neurons are elementary units in an artificial neural network. The artificial neuron receives one or more inputs, representing excitatory postsynaptic potentials and inhibitory postsynaptic potentials at neural dendrites, and sums them to produce an output, or activation, representing a neuron's action potential which is transmitted along its axon. Usually each input is separately weighted, and the sum is passed through a nonlinear function known as an activation function, or transfer function. The transfer functions usually have a sigmoid shape, but they may also take the form of other nonlinear functions, piecewise linear functions, or step functions. They are also often monotonically increasing, continuous, differentiable, and bounded. An artificial neural net is based on a collection of connected artificial neurons, which loosely model the neurons of a biological brain. Each connection, like the synapses in a biological brain, can transmit a signal to other neurons. An artificial neuron receives signals, then processes them, and can send to neurons connected to it. The signal at a connection is a real number, and the output of each neuron is computed by some nonlinear function of the sum of its inputs. The connections are called edges. Neurons and edges typically have a weight that adjusts as learning proceeds. The weight increases or decreases the strength of the signal at a connection. Neurons may have a threshold such that a signal is sent only if the aggregate signal crosses the threshold. Defining parameters and topology is a combination of empirical work and scientific work, but there is no mathematical theory that must be respected. The algorithmic process is cyclical, and its convergence is based on the minimization of errors. Starting from the perceptron, the first artificial neuron created, the knowledge of neuronal modeling has evolved, currently having multiple types of artificial neural nets, specialized in performing specific pattern recognition. For this, the basic patterns of ANNs are modified. For example, the convolutional artificial neural nets. They correspond to ANNs specialized in identifying certain types of patterns, such as images. The image presents an example of an ANN oriented to recognize images of numbers written freehand. The result is a discrete indicator associated to the number read. Starting from the traditional artificial neuron, to build artificial brains, Hi has created a new type of neuron. This new type of neuron will be called Mathematical Artificial Neuron. Its name was derived from the fact that the neuron is built, based on mathematical models that represent a system, and that it does contains logical or intuitive elements. The mathematical artificial neuron is a mathematical model, presumably of optimization, which results from the partitioning and decomposition of a monolithic problem into an atomized model, following the mathematical laws of large-scale mathematical modeling. Two mathematical artificial neurons communicate with each other, forming a network of mathematical artificial neurons. Communication occurs in two directions between the two neurons. The communication protocol between the two neurons is defined by mathematical laws developed to solve atomized problems. The modeler can choose the protocol, but not the communication process, which for optimization is based on the scientific laws of duality theory, and for equilibrium problems in mathematical programming with equilibrium constraints, PEC, methodologies. A mathematical neuron represents a robot, which can communicate with another robot, autonomously, since it knows the mathematical rules that it must respect. This is what happens in the human brain, where autonomic systems communicate with each other to make decisions. Like all mathematics, theory is cadent, and for those of us who already work in high-complexity mathematical modeling, it is the logical step we must take. It's just widening the look, and thinking a little outside the box. The mathematical artificial neuron is a mathematical superstructure, representing a complete system. A mathematical artificial neuron network can be a neuron of a larger mathematical artificial neuron network. This law of transitivity is typical of large-scale modeling. This process can be repeated, until the smallest mathematical artificial neurons, the atoms of the system, are obtained. A large-scale system can be represented by a mathematical artificial neuron, and covers multiple subsystems, where each of them can be represented by a mathematical artificial neuron. Using large-scale methodologies, the mathematical artificial neuron can be divided into two, or more, mathematical artificial neurons, forming a mathematical network of artificial neurons. This process can be repeated, until the smallest mathematical artificial neurons, the atoms of the system, are obtained. The diagram presents the hierarchical structure of decomposition and partition of an oil and gas company. The structure presented is similar to that of the cerebral cortex, and based on mathematical artificial neurons any system can be represented, in a similar way to large-scale optimization models. This representation is made based on a network of mathematical artificial neurons, and could be further divided until it reaches the atoms of the system, indivisible mathematical artificial neurons. Industry 6.0 is completely changing the mathematical modeling of artificial intelligence. Now we can talk about orchestration of swarms of cognitive robots, and living industrial ecosystems. These two terms are new to most people, including scientists, even though they date back at least 15 years. The mathematical artificial neuron is the essence of the orchestration of swarms of cognitive robots. Albert Einstein said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, imagination encircles the world." Thank you for your attention.